Greetings and welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. The legal, the loyal, the regal, the royal Ronin Ralph, your master of ceremonies. I would like to take this time to tell you folks thank you for joining me on Ralph Reads, and to please tell a friend to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll say that again. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On this edition of Ralph Reads, I bring to you the finale of the Al C. Clarke, better known as Donald Goines' novella, Death List. Without any further ado, let the reading commence. Chapter 14. Detectives Nelson and Stewart decided to give up the stakeout on the motel. After all, they were sitting around waiting for a man they weren't sure they wanted. When the call came over their two-way radio about the shootout at the Holiday Inn, they decided to drive over and check it out. Upon their arrival, the first thing they noticed was the car belonging to Detectives Benson and Ryan.
We should have known these bastards would be up on the fucking shootout,
Nelson growled as he tried to find a place to park. Had the two detectives not been so busy cursing out their rivals, they would have noticed the two well-dressed black couples making their way out of the crowd of curious onlookers around the courtyard. What was so peculiar about the two couples was that both men and one of the women had their hair completely shaved off. Their heads shone with some kind of lotion between the bright neon lights. The two couples hurried away from the crowd toward the parked car near the parking lot of the Holiday Inn. Neither detective noticed because they were too busy with their petty jealousy.
These fucking guys get all the breaks,
Detective Stewart said before getting out the car. As Detectives Nelson and Stewart bellyached to each other, the four members of Kenyatta's organization made their way to their car. It was of the utmost importance that they reach Kenyatta at once to let him know what had just happened at the motel. Their orders had been to check into the Holiday Inn to make sure Kenyatta's orders had been carried out. Only one of them had known what the leader's orders had been, but with the killing of their best hitman, whom all of them recognized on sight, they knew something had gone wrong. They had stayed long enough to find out just what had happened inside the room. They knew the white man and the black maid had been killed. This they had witnessed themselves. Eddie B had been at the window and had seen the creeper when he slipped in the open doorway behind the maid's back. And afterwards, while the creeper was busy elsewhere, Jug had run over to check it out, bringing back the news that the elderly black woman was indeed dead. Jug settled his lean, angular body into the driver's seat of the rented black Chevy and started the motor. Eddie B got into the back seat with his woman. Each man had brought his girlfriend along to make it look legitimate when they checked into the double suite at the motel. For Eddie B, who had been in on the holdup of the stamp place, this was a cakewalk. He only wished all his assignments were this easy. As soon as you see a payphone, pull over, Eddie B ordered loudly from the rear of the car. Hey man, Jug yelled back, resenting the idea of the man telling him what was obvious. When I need some advice, I'll ask for it, okay? But telling me what any fool would realize is something I don't appreciate. From the tone of Jug's voice, Eddie B realized he had overstepped the bounds in trying to be helpful. Okay, baby, don't get no attitude, Eddie B said quickly. I was just trying to be helpful, that's all.
There's a payphone over on your right,
Jug's girlfriend Almeida said. She was rather tall and completely bald, just like her man. If it wasn't for her huge chest, people would take her for a man at first glance. After a quick look, Jug swung to the curb next to the phone booth. Almeida had trouble beating Eddie B out of the car because he tried to push the seat up so that he could get out first. Slow down, man, Jug cautioned. It don't make no difference which one of us makes the report. We're all together on this job, so just be cool. You ain't gonna gain nothing or lose nothing by being the one to report it to Kenyatta. Eddie B sat back in his seat. He wished he had been the one to break the news to Kenyatta, but it had been impossible to get out of the car before Almeida. After one more cold glance at the man in the rear, Jug shook his head in disgust. I don't know how you put up with such a nigger, Penny, he stated, looking at Eddie B's woman in his rearview mirror. Penny just shook her head.
You know it's a man shortage in the streets, Jug, so sometimes a girl has to take what comes along.
She laughed to take the sting out of her words. It didn't take but 2 or 3 minutes before Almeida rejoined them in the car.
I got in touch with Kenyatta,
she said breathlessly, as if she had just run a mile.
But Ali answered the phone, and do you know that nigga didn't want to put Kenyatta on the line until I told him what it was about? I mean, he just wouldn't call Kenyatta.
She sounded dumbfounded about the situation, but continued.
I know he'd like to take Kenyatta's place, but if he was in charge, I'd quit, just like that. I'd give up the organization because he's too much for me. He thinks he's too pretty, first of all. Then he believes he's the only person with any sense. Ain't nobody else got no brains but him, if you listen to him. That's the impression he gives me anyway.
Shit, Penny sighed loudly.
I think Ali's one fine black nigga, if you ask me.
It's a good thing didn't nobody ask you then, Eddie B stated coldly, his anger showing in his voice.
Aw, honey,
Penny said, rubbing his jaw.
Ain't no reason you getting jealous, 'cause as long as you're around, there ain't no room in my heart for no other man.
I'll bet, Jug said under his breath so that the rest of them didn't hear. What did Kenyatta say after you gave him the news? He inquired loudly.
Oh,
Almeida moaned, surprised by the simple question.
He wants us to get out to the farm at once. It took him by surprise that the creeper got himself killed, but not me. I'm glad the dirty, murdering son of a bitch is dead.
She spoke with more venom than she realized.
I couldn't stand the sight of him as it was. Then after those murders he did, shit. Well, all I got to say is, I hope don't nobody else join our organization like him. I ain't never seen no man like him before, and I hope I don't live long enough to meet another one. I'll say amen to that,
Penny replied quickly.
He was a murdering bastard at that. There was no reason for him to kill that maid. Did you tell Kenyatta about him killing the maid? No, there was no time for that,
Almeida replied softly.
As soon as I told him about Creeper getting cut down as he came out of the motel room, he wanted to know if the Creeper took care of his homework. To which I replied, yes, I was sure of that. They carried the fat man out on a long stretcher with his face covered up. I didn't see his face like I told him, but from the shape on that stretcher, it had to be Fat Boy. Couldn't nobody else have a belly sticking up in the air like that.
Suddenly, Jug made a sharp turn off Woodward. I want to hit the freeway as soon as possible. I think we had better get out that farm fast. Things might start jumping around town, and everybody will have to go in hiding. Jug meticulously picked his way through the evening traffic. Almeida rolled her window up.
Damn, if it ain't getting chilly out,
she stated.
I don't know if it's all that safe at the farm. What do you think about it, Jug?
Well, I'm on my way over there, whether or not it's safe. We've made plans in case this kind of thing happen. If it comes down to it, we just go into what Kenyatta calls Operation Breakout. We all know about it, so now will be the time to put it into action if it comes to that. His words brought silence to the people in the car. Each one was filled with his or her own thoughts. No one really wanted to go through with the so-called Operation Breakout, but it had been planned, and everybody knew what their roles in it would be. While the car, with its 4 occupants, fled towards the outskirts of town, 2 detectives back at the motel were trying to wrap up the case. Benson walked into the room, feeling the 2 heavy packages of money he had removed from the dead man's body in his pockets. He was still undecided on whether or not to give one of them to his partner. "Did you get anything out of your man before he died?" he inquired of Ryan. Ryan looked up tiredly. "I don't know, Ben. He mentioned something about a farm, but that was about it. What about your man out here? Did he have anything to say before he passed on to the hell waiting for him?" Benson managed to grin. "Yeah, he managed to gain enough strength to spit in my face before he kicked off," Benson answered truthfully. "That bastard was mean through and through. I don't think there was a kind streak in him anywhere." "I'm inclined to believe you there, but it looks like he made a mistake about our boy Angelo here. It turns out Angelo was a little bit rougher than he had thought." Ryan held up the little pea shooter Angelo had used to punch 2 holes in the creeper's belly. "He hit his man, didn't he?" "Yeah," Benson answered. "It's like I told you. It wasn't just my shot that put him away. When we saw him reeling, it was from them 2 shots he had in his gut." As the other policemen began pouring into the small motel room, Ryan asked his partner if he had found anything of value on the dead man. Benson shrugged. "It depends on what you call value." He nodded his head towards the toilet. "Let's step in the men's room for a minute. I got something I'd like to show you." Ryan followed his partner into the bathroom. Neither man spoke until Benson closed the door and leaned against it. "Well, what is it? Did the guy give us a lead?" Ryan asked impatiently. "No, it ain't no fucking lead," Benson replied, then removed 1 bundle of money from his pocket and tossed it towards his partner. "He didn't have that on him, so I wondered if you and I could use it. Or should we turn it in for evidence that will never be used?" For the next 5 minutes, Benson watched his friend and partner change expressions. "Not me, Ben. What do you want to do about it?" Without realizing it, Benson fingered the other banknotes in his pocket. He knew what he was going to do. Next time he would come out with something if the captain should ever make good on one of his many threats to remove him from his position. Whatever Ryan decided to do with the bundle of money he had tossed to him was all right with him, but the one in his pocket was going to stay there. "No, Ryan, it's not my decision. If I was to go in to keep it for myself, you would never have known. But I wanted you up on it. It's a nice piece of money, and nobody will miss it. If you want to, we can split it up between us. If not, turn it in. But don't ask me to make the decision. That way, if you have guilty thoughts later on, I don't want you blaming me. I'll go along with you either way. I could use the money, and so could you. But it's your baby. Make up your own mind." "God damn it, Ben. Why the hell do you do these kinds of things to me? Ain't I got enough problems worrying about this fucking case without you tossing temptation in front of me like this?" "We ain't getting no younger, Ryan. If something bad should happen to either one of us, this would go a long way towards helping the few people in this world who mean anything to us." It took a second, but finally a sheepish grin broke out over Ryan's face. "Well, I guess it ain't like being on a take. It must have been the money the bastard got for trying to make the hit on Angelo." The 2 men stared at each other, and finally Benson broke the silence. "Then I take it you'll go along with holding back this small sum for ourselves?" Ryan shook his head undecidedly. "I just don't know yet, Ben. Let's sit on it for a while, okay?" Their eyes met, and then Ryan glanced away, but not before Benson could read the greed there. Ryan wanted the money, but just didn't know how to go about keeping it. His conscience would bother him for a while, but Benson was sure he would get over it. A sudden commotion in the outer room brought both detectives rushing out. To their astonishment, they found Nelson and Stewart there trying to take charge. "Hold on, boys," Ryan said harshly. "I've already given these men their orders, so don't interfere. This is our little problem, so you guys just take a back seat." As the detectives dickered among themselves, Kenyatta was busy making calls from his farm. He was also making one final decision, one that involved the Kingfisher. "Listen, Jerry, I've tried every way possible to make this hit made without using you, but I put you in the position you're in just in case something like this came up. Well, it's up. There's no other way out of this. Either you make the hit on the Kingfisher or the bastard gets away." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a minute, Kenyatta wondered if the man had hung up, but then he spoke in a low voice. "Well, what do you want me to do?" "Do?" Kenyatta roared. "Why, I want you to assassinate the bastard. Shoot the motherfucker down like the dog that he is. If you do this, Jerry, you'll save hundreds of black lives. Hundreds." Kenyatta did not add that the man would also be giving up his own life when he followed through with the order. "How?" Jerry asked. To Kenyatta, the question was too simple. It showed that the man wasn't using his head. It might benefit Jerry to act like he was a robot sometimes, but Kenyatta knew that this job required a man to use his brain. "How?" Kenyatta repeated loudly. "Man, you're not even trying to think, Jerry. I got you that job there in the apartment building because you were one of my best trained men and most faithful. Remember your baby sister dying from the overdose?" Kenyatta knew that should be enough to convince him, but he continued anyway. "Well, I can damn near prove the dope came from the Kingfisher, but all that shit ain't necessary. Either you're gonna do it or not. If you are, this is all you have to do. When the Kingfisher and his men come back downstairs, you get as close as possible and cut loose with that .38 I gave you. As good a shot as you are, it shouldn't take but one shitty-ass shot. But I want you to be sure to hit him twice. You got that, Jerry? When he comes out through the lobby, you're to make your hit." This time, there was a long silence before the man finally spoke. "I understand, Kenyatta. This is what I've been trained for, so I'll do it. I'm as dedicated as anybody else in the organization." "Good. Just make sure you don't miss, Jerry. Make sure you don't miss. And don't forget, put 2 slugs in his dope-selling ass. You hear me? One for your sister and one for the rest of the kids who have died from the poison his men have been selling in our neighborhoods." Kenyatta waited until the man answered affirmatively. "Okay then, when you hang up, go get your piece. You ain't got no time to waste. We want this bastard dead before he receives the new shipment of dope coming in. We can't cut the shipment off, but if we hit the Kingfisher, he won't be able to distribute that fucking poison." After hanging up the telephone, Jerry moved as if he was under some kind of spell. First, he went to open up his locker. From it, he took out the still new .38 automatic. The gun shined from constant polishing. It had never been fired. He picked out 6 bullets from a full box, then put the rest back into his locker. He laid the gun and bullets out on the bench that he used when changing in and out of his work clothes. After he finished putting on his fresh bellboy uniform, Jerry had trouble figuring out where to put the gun. If he stuck it in his belt, it would make a bulge. He might be able to conceal it under his arm, but he didn't have a shoulder holster to make it stay in place. He sat down on the bench for 10 minutes trying to figure out what to do with the gun. Suddenly, he got an idea. He stood up, put the gun in his belt next to the small part of his back, then pulled his coat down over it. It didn't seem to bulge too much, and if he kept his back turned, nobody would notice it anyway. At last, Jerry was ready. At no time had he doubted that he would go through with this assignment. This was what he had been trained for, his purpose in being here. He made his way back up the steps with swiftness and certainty. He was now a dedicated man with a mission. It happened sooner than he hoped for. Jerry hadn't been in the lobby more than 40 minutes when the private elevator that handled only the Kingfisher's penthouse began to come down. Jerry watched the dial as it moved lower and lower. Kingfisher stood in the elevator smiling. He had heard the news on the television and had watched the film clips of the bodies being removed from the Holiday Inn. He knew the identity of the man the creeper had gunned down. Just a short time earlier, he had put through a call and had told some big men his idea about somebody selling guns to the blacks in the ghetto, and the name Angelo had been one of those mentioned as the possible seller. As soon as this had been brought to the big man's attention, they had made the logical connections. Whoever supplied the guns was more than likely the same man who supplied the blacks with the list of people bringing dope into the city. Now that the gun runner was dead, it wouldn't take long before the men who had bought the guns would be out scratching for another connect, thus exposing themselves. When they did, they would be taken care of. To celebrate, the Kingfisher was taking everybody in his place out on the town. Vicky, the Kingfisher's special woman, smiled broadly for the first time in what seemed like months, fussing over which expensive gown she should wear. The gold one or the navy blue one that looked good with the string of pearls Kingfisher had brought for her. She decided to wear the low-cut gold gown. It revealed more in the front and back. She dressed with care. It had been so long. So goddamn long since they had been anywhere. She could hear Kingfisher singing in the bedroom as he dressed. What a time they would have tonight. It seemed as if they had been living under the shadow of fear for so long that they had been tempted to run off, just pack a few of the expensive things Kingfisher had bought for her and leave town. The news on the television meant that was all over now, and everybody seemed happy. "Let's go," the Kingfisher called out happily. It had been quite a while since anyone had seen him in such a good mood. Vicky rushed out of the bedroom and joined the rest of the party at the elevator. They waited while one of the bodyguards used his key to open up the doors. Then the small party of 5 people walked in. Besides Vicky and Kingfisher, there were 3 bodyguards going along. It was quite a cutback from the time when the Kingfisher wouldn't go out with fewer than 6 bodyguards. As soon as the elevator door opened at the ground floor, the bodyguards got out. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. The bellboy standing near the door was the same one they had seen many times before. As Kingfisher stepped from the elevator with a big smile on his face, he noticed the youthful bellboy start towards them. Jerry reached behind his back, and the next thing Kingfisher saw was the long barrel of a .38 automatic pointed directly at him. His heart froze. The warning yell he gave to his bodyguards was too late. He attempted to duck behind his woman. Vicky let out a scream of fear as she felt Kingfisher trying to use her for a shield. But the young gunman wouldn't be denied. He pushed the gun in Kingfisher's face and pulled the trigger. The roar of the .38 was deafening, as were the answering shots that cut the young boy down in his tracks. The Kingfisher's body had slid down the wall. The bellboy had been struck from 2 different sides. Kingfisher's bodyguards were not slow. They had just been taken completely by surprise. The 2 shots fired by the bellboy had struck the Kingfisher high in the neck. He had been dead before he reached the luxurious carpet. King Fisher didn't live long enough to know that his bodyguards had done their job, at least avenging him, if not managing to protect him. Chapter 15. As the police left Kenyatta's club on the north side of Detroit and headed towards the farm in the country, some of the people on the farm were making hurried efforts to leave. As soon as the club had been raided, Kenyatta had been called and duly informed. The few members inside the club hadn't stood up too long before giving out the information on Kenyatta's whereabouts, but that was something Kenyatta had expected. Kenyatta was well armed when he left the farm, taking 4 men with him. Each of the men took his woman along in one of the 2 cars. Jug and his girlfriend, Almeida, Eddie B with his lady, and Red and Arlene, the woman who had gotten rid of the guns for them after the holdup. Kenyatta and Betty, with over $30,000 in the black briefcase between them, rode with Zeke and his black queen. Each couple was armed to the teeth, men and women alike, as they pulled out of the farmyard. The rest of the people watched them go, not knowing when their leader would return. Ali stood at the front door scratching his chin. He had been left in charge, and that was all that mattered to him. But he could feel something wrong. He couldn't know that his rule would only last a few hours. Ali didn't have the knowledge that Kenyatta possessed. He was uninformed about the raid on the city clubhouse, and he didn't know that an army of police were on their way to the farm at that very moment. When Kenyatta and his group reached the airport, they parked the cars in the no-standing zone, abandoning them. None of them had any thoughts of returning that way. It was time to get out. It was a well-thought-out plan of escape. Now was the time to put it to use. Everybody followed Kenyatta into the airport. As he bypassed the ticket windows, he turned and joked with his followers. "Now that sure in the hell would be a waste of money, wouldn't it?" he said, as he shifted the heavy black bag around in his left hand. All the women carried big, heavy shoulder bags. Each couple carried a certain amount of cash on them, in case they had run into more trouble than they could handle and had to split up, but none of them had as much as Kenyatta carried. They waited about 10 minutes until people started boarding a non-stop flight to California. Then Kenyatta led his small group toward the loading ramp. The airport was set up in such a way that they didn't check for weapons until a person was going onto the ramp that led into the plane. Here, a few guards stood around looking bored, watching the metal detector to see if anyone was possibly carrying a weapon. When Kenyatta's group reached them, there was no suspicion because the group was well dressed and smiling. They came up to the ramp as if they had tickets. Then all at once, hell broke loose. Kenyatta pulled out an automatic. He waved it at the guards as his people came rushing up beside him. With a wave of his hand, he said "Red," rushing up the ramp. The sight of the black men trying to commandeer the plane sent the guards into action. As Red came rushing up, one tried to reach out and stop him with his arms, while another took a step back and pulled out his gun. Neither man found success. The first one took a bullet from Red's gun right in his face. Blood flew everywhere as the white guard crumpled to the floor. There was a red gash where his face had been. As the second guard came out with his gun, Red's woman, who was just a step behind him, shot from the hip and took the guard by surprise. Her first shot hit him high in the chest, spinning him around. The second shot took the back of his head off. The couple ran past, not bothering to see the object of their handiwork fall to the floor. "Everybody stand still!" Kenyatta ordered loudly. "And nobody will get hurt!" As he spoke, a guard on Kenyatta's blind side made his move. As soon as the man reached for his weapon, Betty stepped around her man and raised the sawed-off shotgun she carried in her bag. The gun was cut off so that it was almost as short as a pistol. She gave the man both barrels. The sight of what the shotgun did froze the other men in fear. There was no doubt in their minds now that the blacks meant business. Kenyatta backed up the ramp, using the girl who had been at the checkpoint as his shield. He stopped and waved Betty, and the rest of his crowd passed. They rushed up the ramp towards Red, who had the steward shaking from fear under the sight of his gun. Kenyatta measured words roared out over the airport. "You honkies better pay heed, or we'll kill everything white on the plane!" A dark flush stained his lean and sallow cheeks as rage glittered in his cold black eyes. The sight of the terrified white girl in the tall black man's arms made the guards hesitate. There was no doubt that he would kill her. The guards held their weapons in check and allowed Kenyatta to make his way on up the ramp. Eddie B stood at the top of the ramp waiting for him while he pointed 238 short-nosed police specials at the white man at the bottom of the ramp. "That's right!" Kenyatta roared as he backed into the plane, followed by Eddie B. "If you don't want any dead passengers or stewards, keep your hands off them motherfucking guns!" His voice carried all the way through the plane, causing a near panic among the passengers. The members of his gang had already taken complete command of the plane. The pilot of the plane was well aware of the fact that his plane had been commandeered by a bunch of black gunmen. He reached the tower by radio and asked for information on what to do. "Follow their orders. Don't endanger any of the passengers," the voice from the tower replied. "The people who have taken control of your plane are murderers. They have just killed at least 4 people in the terminal, so be careful." The co-pilot glanced over at the captain. Their eyes locked for a quiet moment, but that was broken by the entry of Zeke. The tall black man stood in the cockpit with a cocked gun in his hand. He aimed it at the back of the co-pilot's head. "There won't be any trouble if you don't give us any," the black man stated harshly. From the way the man spoke, the pilot knew he meant business. "Where to?" the pilot asked softly. "When we get off the ground, I'll let you know," Zeke replied, then smiled. It had gone easier than Kenyatta had said it would. "Wherever we go," he said offhandedly, "you can bet it will be a black country." "Yes, indeed," Zeke said, speaking more to himself than the white pilots. "It's gonna sure enough be black." We have reached the end of this miniseries on Ralph Reads. I would like, or rather love, to thank you queens and kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. You may connect with me via Facebook. Send a friend request while you still can to Ralph Anthony Garcia, and on Twitter and Instagram at RGMC2407. Send an email to rgmc2407@gmail.com, where if you would like to leave a donation, please use the Zelle app or paypal.me/RGMC2407 or Cash App. My cash tag is RGMC2407. You may also connect with me on my other channel, my music channel, Ralph Garcia, Master of Ceremonies, and right here on TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you, and I love you like cooked food. I will see you folks on the next edition of Ralph Reads. Thank you all very kindly for your continued patronage.